I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, yeah, we have sorely changed. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. That is what I heard them say, yeah. Way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave, yeah, before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Hey, hey. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Whoa, oh, 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 oh.
And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spud Cohen.
Yes! 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 Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's me. It's literally me. Keep clapping. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. I'm so happy to have you here tonight. What is it? July the 10th? July the 10th. I'm so happy to have you here on July the 10th. Last week was our 1-year anniversary episode, so this is the beginning of the second year of My Fellow Americans. I'm so happy to have you. Thank you again. This is a Muddied Waters media production. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Check us out on Anchor, Twitter, Periscope, iTunes, Google Play. Check us out everywhere. Give us reviews everywhere. Hit the bell if you need to be notified there. Do all the bells and the follows and everything everywhere. Thank you so much. Be sure to share this episode too. The last thing I want is for one of your closest friends or family to miss out on a roughly hour-long anarchist podcast on a Wednesday evening. That would be terrible. Be sure to give the gift of Spike Cohen today. Kids love it. This program, as always, is brought to you by Anchor FM. I will be plugging that later, roughly halfway through this program, probably at a very inappropriate moment. The intro and outro music to this and every episode of My Fellow Americans is from the amazing and talented Mr. Joe Davi. That is Jodavi. Check him out on Facebook. Check him out on SoundCloud. Go to joedavimusic.bandcamp.com. Buy his entire discography. It's less than $20. You'll love it. Thank you to, no, not Kroger. Thank you to Canada for this delicious water that I drink in this and every Canadian episode of My Fellow Americans, Bulavanaka. Shout out to Tehran Turks' mom and him as always. Guys, before I introduce my guest, very important update on something that has been racking the followers of Muddied Waters Media for the last 48 hours now. We had probably one of the most important polls we've ever had. Definitely one of the most engaged polls we've ever had. The age-old question of which would you rather fight, an elephant-sized turtle or 5,000 turtle-sized elephant? And we got a lot of questions and a lot of confusion and a lot of anger. People were angry, and I wasn't ready for the anger, but they were. And but it's for a while there it was neck and neck. At one point it was I think the turtle-sized elephant were at like 50.1%, and the elephant-sized turtle was at 49.9. Now for quite a while now, the elephant-sized turtle in the last 24 hours has just completely pulled away. It's not even close anymore. Or at least it's not close enough statistically for the turtle-sized elephant to come back. So even though there's still another, I think, hour left on the poll, we are comfortable calling the poll for elephant-sized turtle. And with over 500 votes, I think we got close to 600 votes. And so that actually is the correct answer, an elephant-sized turtle. The turtle-sized elephant would run you down. There's just too many of them. So I'm glad we got that update. So now that we've got that out of the way, my guest tonight, I'm very excited about. My guest tonight is even more Jewish than me, which is not difficult, sadly. He's also equally as anarchist as I am, which is more difficult. He's the co-founder of AnarchoVegas, which will be, let me pull that up. That's going to be the very first year of AnarchoVegas. It's going to be in Las Vegas, Nevada on July 20th and 21st. We're going to be talking more about that. But ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please welcome to my fellow Americans, the Anarchy Jewish Man himself, Mr. Yaakov Markel. Yaakov, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for
I'm really excited to have you on, man. So guys, be sure to comment with your questions and thoughts, and Yaakov and I will tell you if you are right or wrong. Now, Yaakov, this is your first time as a guest, and the first question that I ask new guests whenever they come onto my show for the first time is, how did you become, in your case, an anarchist? Have you always been an anarchist? Was there this aha moment or kind of a gradual evolution? Tell us about that.
So I've sort of always been an anarchist, but there was sort of an aha moment where I realized that I was an anarchist.
Oh, okay.
But to be honest, my grandfather was born in Frankfurt on my father's side. My grandfather was born in Frankfurt in 1921. And they escaped Frankfurt. They escaped Germany right before the war. Didn't have any citizenship anywhere. They weren't, they were in France. And they sort of made their way to Israel and didn't get any citizenship. None of them had citizenship until they eventually got citizenship from the British, Palestinian citizenship from the British. My grandmother was actually born in Jaffa, Palestine in 1923, also didn't have citizenship until she was, I don't know, maybe 18 or 19 or something like that. So nationalism was never really something that, that we had on my father's side, because shortly after 1948, after the socialists basically took over in Israel, they said, well, my grandfather basically said, like, we can't do business here, so let's get the heck out of here. So
they actually left when Israel was formed.
Yes. Yeah. They were sort of on the, you had, people don't realize, but there was sort of a civil war going on at that time also. So they were part of the Cherut party. Cherut means freedom. And that was basically the only free market party. And obviously the socialists won. And so Israel became essentially a socialist country, almost communist country.
It was pretty close to a communist country. Yeah.
Not quite, Soviet communism, but basically no recognition of property rights or, no enshrinement of rights like you have in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, nothing like that,
Right.
They looked at that and they said, well, it's time to leave. So when they decided they wanted to move to Los Angeles, they had family in LA, and so they moved to Canada. My father was like 5 years old. They moved to Canada and then eventually made their way to LA. Yeah,
That's interesting. So my father's side of the family also came to the U.S. from Canada, and this would have been around, it was earlier though, it was around the late 1800s, early 1900s, and some of them are still up in the maritime provinces, up in the eastern provinces, but they came down and settled in Massachusetts, where most of them are now. We're the ones that were the snowbirds that moved to Myrtle Beach. But so that's interesting. So these were two stateless people, or for a long time stateless people. They settle in essentially our historical homeland, and they go, okay, this is working out for us. And then when people go, great news, we're going to make a Jewish state, and also it's going to be communist, they're like, no, we're out of here.
Well, the funniest part is that my grandmother's family had, have been in Palestine for hundreds of years at least, as far as back as we can trace. My grandmother's grandfather was a rabbi in Jerusalem, and it just goes back and back. So yeah,
that's funny.
Pretty interesting. So
that is funny.
Got a Jewish socialist state. It's not really a Jewish state, it's a secular state with a Jewish majority population.
It's a Jew-flavored secular socialist state, right? Like
exactly.
there was a huge debate about even mentioning God in the founding charters, and they came to a settlement where they used a term that means the rock of my memory's failing me now, the rock of something, and they were able to say, well, we meant God, but then. Right. But then some of the people that signed off on it said, we never signed off on God. That was supposed to be like meaning our heritage and culture, not God. So it was not there's been a lot of revision now to make it into this, like, that this was this biblical thing that happened. And it really was not.
A lot of religious Jews don't recognize the state of Israel.
Right.
They don't say that, they won't put up Israeli flags or celebrate Israel in much of any way. A lot of Jews, actually, a lot of Orthodox Jews in Israel don't celebrate, Israeli Independence Day or stand for this moment of silence or whatever. They don't pay taxes. They're actually a pretty staunchly Orthodox, anti-Israel community in Israel. They refuse to pay taxes. They refuse to vote for the most part. They refuse to sign up for the military or anything.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
But they're still in Israel.
Well, they're not going to move. They were there before Israel was created.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I know there are the ones that, I forget what their name is, but I know there are a lot of them in like the Brooklyn, New York area that believe that that Jews aren't even supposed to go back there until the Mashiach, until Messiah comes. And but so these are just ones that are like, we didn't agree, we didn't consent to any of this. You came here and did your own thing, and we just don't want to be a part of it. That's funny.
Well, the Hasidic Jews don't believe. It's not that they don't believe that Jews should go back to live there. It's fine to go and live there, but it's they feel that it's incorrect to create a Jewish state.
Right.
To create a political entity. They can live there and be under. They were under the Turks and they were under British rule and so on and so on. But to fight against the world and create a Jewish political entity that they feel is outside of the bounds of Judaism. Right.
And this kind of, so from what I've read, so there have been a lot of prominent Jewish anarchists. There have also been a lot of prominent Jewish everythings, but that just seems to be what we do. But we tend to rise to prominence. But it seems to me, and correct me.
Conspiracy.
I wasn't going to say it, but it seems to me, if you look at a people who are a tiny minority of people, I mean, you're talking like 50 million or less than 50 million Jews in a world, in a planet of 7 billion people. I mean, to call them a minority is almost a joke. I mean, there are so very, very few of us, and then beyond that, so many of us are over time, mixed with other races and things like that. So I mean, it would be hard for us to create a big national structure. And when you look at the history of how we've been treated in other countries, what has happened in countries where the government has gotten bigger and bigger, what almost inevitably results every time. You would think that Jews should, or I would think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you disagree, but it seems like Jews should be natural anarchists or at least natural libertarians. And yet Jews by and large most people tend to vote for ever increasing government, but most Jews seem to be on the edge of the spear of voting for ever increasing government. You think of Bernie Sanders, who was, the main figurehead of democratic socialism in the U.S. And why do you think that is?
It's really odd, and it actually makes no sense.
Right.
Historically, governments have never worked out for the Jews. It's been a story of persecution for 2,000 years.
Right.
Right. So more even. So the idea that Jews are so pro statism, it kind of boggles the mind. A funny thing to note: there are actually more U.S. government employees than there are Jews in the world. That
doesn't surprise me. I'm sure that's. I mean, it's absurd to me. You look at, even in biblical times, if you even reading the Torah, it's just one story after the next of a larger nation coming in, and the Jews having to fight to overcome them. And then after that, historically, they stopped being able to overcome them and had to kind of scatter out and make their way the best they could. And I'm just thinking, like, how would you not come out of that saying that we do better just having voluntary interactions with people who want to associate with us, and not being forced into association with people who, at sometimes, the majority of whom either are ambivalent to us or outright hate us? It makes zero sense to me. And again, go ahead.
It's actually a fairly new development. Throughout history, Jews have mostly been pretty anarchist. When they were in the Soviet Union, they were doing things underground, the black market, having Jewish schools, and whatever they needed to do, kosher food. Everything had to be black market. It was very anarchist. And then prior to that, under the czars, they were essentially underground and black market and anarchist, and beyond that, and so on and so forth. The story of Purim is that Haman, the antagonist in that story, his complaint against the Jews is that they follow their own laws. They don't follow the laws of the king. They have their own holidays. They do their own thing. They don't pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, if you look at, so the Jews, they have their rabbinical laws, and they have their rabbinate that is, telling them how to live by it, and they go, no, we want a king. And so there's a whole part of the Bible which is the folly of demanding a king and all the terrible things that come as a result of that. It's right there. Literally, if you're a religious Jew, it's right there telling you don't do this. And yet here we are. I don't get it. I think some of it might have to do with the kibbutzes and the fact that they're like basically communes, but they're voluntary communes, and they still have a inherent respect for private property, because even if they themselves are sharing all of their stuff in common, and I don't know with kibbutzes, or at least traditional kibbutzes, how much private property is even allowed, but they are inherently respecting the fact that outside of their kibbutz are people that either are in their own kibbutzes or are just doing their own thing and not in a kibbutz, and they respect that. They aren't trying to take their private property and say, your attempt to own this property is theft. Now, maybe more than me on this. Do kibbutzes have any level of like private ownership, or is it just everything is shared in common, or does it vary?
They're all different. They're
Right.
all very different. As a note, my mother actually, when she was a kid, her parents were socialists, actually card-carrying New York socialists, and
Oh, wow.
they decided that they're going to go and join a kibbutz, really staunch, communist kibbutz in Israel. I forget the name of it, but it's one of the more extreme ones. And they lived there for about a year. And this was one of the very extreme ones where, there's no self-ownership even. Where,
Right.
My mother and her sister they didn't live with their parents. They lived in a children's barracks, and
Oh, wow.
their parents weren't allowed to show them any more attention or affection than they showed to any of the other children in the kibbutz. It was a really hardcore social commune, essentially. So very quickly, they came back to the States. Within a year, they came back to the States and literally never mentioned communism again. So that cured them of any interest in communism whatsoever.
Well, and the thing, I mean, that's the final that's the logical conclusion is your children aren't yours. They belong to the people, quote unquote. And I mean, you look at
Extreme example though. Most of the kibbutzim in Israel are much more, like you said, just sort of joint ownership of the area, and everybody kind of works together, but it's not quite that extreme.
well, and that's what I was thinking because I've seen some people refer to some of these settlements as kibbutzes, and I'm like, I see shops and I see like this looks. Maybe there's some shared ownership in some of them, but it didn't look very kibbutzy to me. But I assume that it was probably that there's variation between them. It's just but that's a perfect example. You say I want real communism, so you go and experience some real communism, then you come back and never were they still socialists after that, or they just won't even talk about it?
They were cured. Yeah.
That's the best. It's like a vaccine. You get the live socialism, and then it makes you immune to wanting it ever again. That is
actually card carrying socialists.
That's
at a time when not quite the popular thing to be in the U.S.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now it's kind of chic and cool, and you wear your Che Guevara shirt. But back then, I mean, they were looking for hammers and sickles, hidden ones on cakes and stuff, and blackballing people for. So like I had mentioned, Jews make up some of the most prominent people across the board. You have Marx on the communist side. You have someone like a Rothbard on the I guess anarcho-capitalist side. You've got on the Chicago school side. You've got Friedman, and I mean you could do this all day long. So then I
von Mises, sure.
Von Mises. You've got all these people. So then I guess the question: how much better are we than the non-us?
How much better are we?
How much better? Whatever metric you want to use, like how many Gentiles does it take to make an us?
You want me to actually answer that?
Well, I mean, ballpark.
Ballpark? That's the thing is that we're anarchists, right? So everything comes down to the individual, right? There are good people and there are bad people. There are some fantastic Jews out there, and there's some pretty horrible Jews out there.
Right.
My brother was a prison chaplain for a while, and he was out in, I think, Tennessee or somewhere over there visiting Jewish prisoners, and he talked to this guy who was a serial killer in the 80s who killed like 89 people or something.
Oh, wow.
Like the guy was Jewish, but that doesn't, it all comes down to the individual, right?
But he excelled at being a murderer.
Oh, sure, he was great at it.
Right, so he's an overachiever.
Getting caught though.
Oh well, yeah. Well, I mean, you kill that many people, eventually someone catches up to you. So that was a very diplomatic answer. The correct answer is actually 7. 7.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah, 7. So yeah, no, that's okay. So we've been talking a little bit about Israel already. I'm going to take a wild stab and say that you would not consider yourself a Zionist. Is that correct?
Correct.
What is your thought?
Not by this standard definition, no.
So that's what I was going to say. What in terms of, because I have some thoughts on this, but I want to get yours first. What is your thoughts? We're anarchists. So when people say to me, do you support the Israeli state? I'm like, I don't support any state. And they're like, yeah, but what about that one? And I'm like, also that one. Like, I don't support. In terms of, I don't want to lead you on too much. What are your thoughts regarding Israel and the Jewish people and the Holy Land and all of that stuff?
I actually lived in Israel for a little while.
Oh, okay.
And it's a beautiful country. I feel a lot of personal connection there. I have a lot of family history there, obviously. Mm-hmm. Technically, I'm a Palestinian citizen. Technically, I'm an Israeli citizen. Technically, I'm a U.S. citizen. Technically, I'm a Canadian citizen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Actually have my Canadian citizenship papers here. But those are all just citizenship designations. That's just the government that claims ownership on them, right?
Right.
So I couldn't care less about those things. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I like the idea of having these multiple citizenships because it's a dilution. But other than that, let them fight over me, right? But other than that, I couldn't care less about any of them. I'm no more Israeli than I am Canadian or American. These are all just made up, or Palestinian. All of these are made up political entities that are connected to some criminal gang that wants to control my life, right?
Right. They're all right.
Sure.
Yeah.
But as far as Zionism is concerned, the idea of Zionism, the original religious idea of Zionism, of a Jew wanting to, feeling a yearning to return to their homeland and live in the place of our forefathers, that's something I feel, although I won't really do it simply because I absolutely despise the Israeli government.
Right.
But sure.
Yeah. And that's sort of where I am. When people ask me, so of course I live in the South. And so the two main things you hear from Christians in the South when you say that you're Jewish are two things. One thing is, my savior's a Jew, which I used to be like, really? And then after a while, I'm like, you know what? That's your thing, and it's important to you, and good. I'm happy for you, and thank you. I get that they actually mean well by. The second thing is, oh wow, I'm a very strong supporter of Israel.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. And then they're like, they want to hear what I have to say about it, and they're like, what do you think about, what's his name? The head of the Hamas or whatever. What do you think about that? About Hamas, or what do you think about Netanyahu, or what do you think? And I'll just be like, yeah, and again, it's how, do I want to like black pill this person, or am I just trying to have a nice conversation at, Kroger? And so I'll just be like, Kroger's a store, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have them there, but I'll just be like, most of the time I'm just like, yeah, it's really terrible what's going on over there, and I just hope that they can, work things out. But the longer answer is what you were saying is like, these are criminal gangs of people, and whatever, critical things you want to say about Hamas, which are valid things that you want to say, can pretty much for the most part be said about Israel or the U.S. or Italy. I mean, these are gangs of people who are using sheets of paper that they wrote on or someone else wrote on, and then stealing money from you to hire angsty C students to point guns at you, and shout out to the C students to point guns at you and force you to do what it says on the sheet of paper while they ignore it almost completely. And but am I a Zionist to the extent that the idea of Jews going back to their historic homeland and, forming voluntary communities to where they can feel safer than where they historically have felt in other times? Yeah, I'm all for that. But I'm like you, like I don't particularly want to go there, because I think what's going on over there is insane. And I don't want in going there to be seen as condoning that. Right. And then, and I mean, it's bad enough I live in the U.S. where I'm essentially, implicitly participating in what the U.S. government does. But yeah, I don't, it's very interesting. And do you find that like when people who don't already know your situation, when they hear you're Jewish, they're like shocked if they to find out that you're not like this staunch Israel supporter?
Yeah, I've actually lost a lot of Jewish friends that way.
That was my next question.
Yeah, one of my lines is when I want to troll people a little bit is I say I'd like to see illegal Mexican settlements in Gaza.
I like that. They convert to Judaism. They'll build it
No, they don't have to convert to Judaism.
They just come over?
Illegal Mexican settlements in Gaza.
Well, they'll build them in 10 seconds. I'll tell you. So, I mean, back home, which, South Carolina, we're against those illegals. And yet everywhere I look, there's an illegal building something. Right. Or I presume an illegal. I shouldn't do that. But, I mean, anyway. So back home, a paving project takes the better part of a week. Like, taking up the old pavement, putting down, it's like a few days. here in Toronto, the community we live in here has taken on a paving project, and it's into month 2, and we're having to take out, the community's having to take out a loan because of some unexpected. It's flat, there aren't any hills here, it's just paving, and
Sure.
and it's it's union labor, it's Canadian union labor, and I occasionally see them working, and I'm like, man, back home this already be done, and it would have cost, even after the conversion rate from Canadian to US, it would have cost a fraction, and it's because of essentially, if not black market, then gray market activity that's getting around all of the different regulations and wage laws and everything else, and saying, no, we're just going to do it cheaper with all these Mexicans that'll do it. Or I shouldn't say that. I don't know that they're Mexican. I don't know. These suspiciously undocumented persons who are building this stuff in a matter of seconds to the hour compared to
Right.
to other people, and it's interesting that people will easily benefit from illegal activity and then turn around and vote for a wall, or vote for these internment camps, essentially, that they're building to to deal with
They
people
go
that
to
are.
restaurants and eat,
What's that?
and yet they go out to restaurants and eat. And if you
Yeah,
ever
and
go to a
yeah,
restaurant,
and they go out to restaurants. Where do you think and obviously it's cognitive dissonance, but where do you think that? Let me ask you this, because you mentioned something. You said that you didn't realize you were an anarchist. Was there ever a point where you thought you were a conservative or a progressive or anything like that? Or
no, I registered to vote when I was 18. I've never voted, but I actually, got caught outside of a grocery store or something like that and said, "Oh, come register to vote." So I actually registered as an independent. And at that point, I already had very libertarian views. By the time I was 18, I think I already at that point considered myself a libertarian. Wasn't really into the Libertarian Party per se, but as far as the libertarian philosophy, that was something that I connected to.
okay,
And then as I got more and more educated, I found Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard and
right,
Jeffrey
right,
Tucker, and started to realize, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I am.
yeah,
Right? And then I had a word for it, right? But yeah, I was just sort of I was always anti-authoritarian. I stopped standing for the national anthem when I was in second grade. My mother was a teacher in the school, also got in a little bit of trouble, but managed to circumvent all of that, and I kept it up, and that was it. The last time I ever stood for the national anthem was second grade, and I just I always thought to myself, this whole, or not the national anthem, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance.
In school they do the Pledge of Allegiance, and
Right.
I thought to myself, what is this nonsense? I'm pledging allegiance to a flag, this cloth, and to
Right.
this republic, and people, if I'm a religious Jew, why would I pledge allegiance to anybody but God? And so that was my thought process in second grade. I was like, this doesn't make any sense, so I'm not going to do it. And I was always very hard-headed, so I just stopped.
Well, and I think that kids intuitively get it, because we always used to. I was homeschooled part of my time in school, and then schooled in public schools. When I was in public schools, all I remember about the Pledge of Allegiance was kids giggling, and that's when people would throw stuff at each other because the teacher's facing the flag, and
Right.
we didn't really. I think you intuitively get that this is kind of a joke, right? It's I love you, flag. I mean it.
But with all of the repetition, year after year after year, it ingrains in you, and people, if you go to a ball game,
Oh God.
and people stand for that anthem, and it's if you're sitting down, and I've had this happen, not at a ball game because it's not my thing, but somewhere, where I'm just oh, okay, they're doing the national anthem, I'm gonna just pull my phone out and check Facebook or whatever, and
Right.
there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
Very upset.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I'm not, because there are people that they want to scream during the anthem and say, like, oh, you're a bunch of bootlegger. To me, I'm just like, that's their thing. And if someone wants to give me a hard time for not doing it, then that's one. It's sort of like if I went to someone's church or someone's mosque or whatever, and they started praying, and I'm not gonna like, this is stupid, I don't believe in this, like, then I just sort of out of like a kind of a combination of respect and unnecessary confrontation avoidance, I'm just like, yeah, you do your thing. So we got a couple of questions, really
That's
serious
one. So,
what's that?
Like one. And
it is a religion. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it is. So we got a couple of really serious questions. Aaron Nakamoto asks, are you an ATF agent?
Hi, Aaron. According to one guy on the internet, yes.
An ATF agent? Nice. That's good. No, I mean, if I'm not being watched, then someone is slacking. So I'm not even really worried about it. I'm live on multiple venues in public. If I'm not being watched, then DHS has failed all of you. Matt Wright asks, what vape are you using?
What vape? This is the OVNS JC01, and it's essentially a Joule compatible battery, and you just drop Joule pods in there, and that's it. And it's basically double the size battery. So that's what I'm using.
Okay. Hopefully.
OVNS JC01.
Okay, good. Yeah, Matt does vape, so he actually knows what any of that meant that you just said.
Cool.
So that's good. So
$20 on eBay.
Okay, cool. So this is the awkward and inappropriate time to plug Anchor FM. Hey guys, are you looking to make a podcast? Well, Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. They have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast, so it sounds great. They will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard everywhere: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And if all of that interests you, which I'm sure it does, be sure to download the Anchor app for Android or iPhone, or go to anchor.fm to get started. And you can even go to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters, and that's us. So I have no segue out of that, but I wanted to get your thoughts about, I usually try to come up with some kind of incredibly corny segue to go in and out of that, but I just couldn't be bothered for this episode. I'm just shilling. So I wanted to get your thoughts on crypto. This is kind of an interesting time to talk about crypto. It's back on the rise again after a year of everyone going, oh, crypto's a joke. And now we're back on what's probably going to, I think, be another moonshot. But I wanted to get your thoughts on crypto. Obviously, you're an anarchist. Do you think that crypto is the future of currency, like the crypto advocates say it is? Do you think it's just going to occupy a space in the world of finance, or do you think it's a fad like Pogs or bottle caps or whatever?
I think that it's absolutely the future, and I think that it's a cat that is out of the bag and is never going back in. I think it's like people that naysay it, they're sort of like Krugman talking about the internet.
That's a good point. The fax machine quote.
I actually sent somebody. I had a friend that was out here. He had to do some kind of trade. I forget what the details were exactly. So he just needed a bunch of Bitcoin, just very quickly. So I sent him some Bitcoin, and he was trying to send me cash for it, or US dollars for it.
Right.
And he had to go to his bank and stand in line for 20 minutes and go talk to a person and do a bunch of signatures and get a cashier's check and get a whole bunch of do a whole bunch of paperwork and deal with 3 different people and jump back in his car and drive across town to go to my bank and to deposit it and stand in line over there, and the whole thing took half his day. And then he's deposited this cashier's check into my account. It's not a personal check, it's a cashier's check, but it still takes whatever it is, 24 hours or something to actually clear my account. And I'm thinking about this situation, and here I've sent him X number of Bitcoin, and it's in his wallet 20 minutes later.
Right.
For nothing, for maybe 70 cent or $1 transaction fee, and that's it. That's the whole transaction. And he had to go and pay $25 for a cashier's check and all of this rigmarole for to accomplish essentially the same thing.
Right.
I'm sending him money, sending me money. It's the same transaction. It's just the other side of it, but so ridiculous. And so the idea that the old system is somehow better than cryptocurrency is just insane.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I wouldn't say, and by the way, I agree with you. I'm not sure the argument is that the old way is better, quote unquote. I think it's two arguments. One is that government is going to, make fiat be what you use. And then the other argument is that, cryptocurrency, even though a specific currency can have a fixed amount, you can also copy that block code and, make essentially a million different Bitcoins or make your own blockchain and, make whatever. So it's sort of de facto unlimited. What is your response?
There are thousands of blockchains and different cryptocurrencies out there,
right,
most of which essentially zero value.
Right.
And the government can try to say that, you can only use our currency and, make other currencies illegal and so on. For example, they just brought back the Zimbabwe dollar and there was a period of time where cryptocurrency was fine in Zimbabwe and there was a group of different currencies that were fine in Zimbabwe.
Right.
Now they've actually just brought back the Zimbabwe dollar and made cryptocurrency illegal. Well, cryptocurrency being illegal in Zimbabwe, what do you think is the first thing that happened? Everybody ran out and dumped whatever they had and bought Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. Well, especially if the alternative is the Zimbabwean dollar. For those who don't know the history of that, at one point, the Zimbabwean dollar, I don't even know if anyone will get that.
Before it collapsed, they had dropped off 27 zeros.
Yeah, it was worth nothing. Like, it was worth less than a fraction of a percent of the cost of making it. It made the Weimar Republic francs look like or Deutschmarks look like Swiss francs or something. I mean, it made it look like it was just an absolute joke of a currency. Venezuela's currency is still markedly better than Zimbabwe's was. So yeah, no, I'm sure everyone is an illegal holder of Bitcoin in Zimbabwe. Now, let me ask you this. So there are competing theories on the for those who do think cryptocurrency has a future. One is that, and I don't know how you feel about this, so I don't want to betray too much how I think. So I'll try to say this and sound unbiased. But one is that there's going to be all these competing currencies, and that Bitcoin's going to be used for this thing, but that there are going to be certain currencies that have very generalized purposes, so you'll only use it for X, like, weed coin or whatever. That's what you'll use when you want to buy weed.
Essentially.
Yeah, maximalism. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that by definition, money is something which benefits from the greatest, the money, let me think how to phrase this. The best money is the one that has the biggest network effect, right? So right now in the world, the best money to use is the US dollar, because you can use it almost anywhere. There are a handful of places that refuse to accept it, but for the most part, you can use it there, and it's the world's trade and reserve currency, right? And that's network effect. I think that Bitcoin will have the greatest network effect.
So you don't.
If you want me to go into why, I can go into why. But
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, as much as you want to delve into that, absolutely.
I mean, for perceptual reasons, simply because it already does have the most network effect. It's the first. It's Bitcoin, and everything else is an altcoin. And so deciding between which altcoin to use versus, the one that has, 40 to 60% of the market right now.
Right.
I think that there are multiple layer solutions being built on top of Bitcoin that will make it much more functional. People have a problem with it being slow, although it's not really that slow. Let me actually address that. You know how long it takes to get to clear a PayPal transaction?
Longer than Bitcoin, but no, I don't know offhand.
You send me your PayPal address and I send you money. How long does it take for you to actually have it?
Oh, in my bank account?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like 3 to 5 days or something
really
like
have
that.
it.
Yeah, like 3 to 5 days or something like that.
6 months.
Really?
Yeah, sure. Because I can send it to you and you can have it and you can spend it in theory. But if I go back and dispute the charge, PayPal can pull that out of your account and you don't actually have it until 6 months have passed. So it's essentially, it's loaned to you for 6 months, right?
Right.
Like,
That's
for example, when you have you have a bank account and I write you a check and you go and deposit that check into your account. Now, it hasn't cleared yet, but you can still go straight from the bank. It's not going to clear till tomorrow, but you can go straight from the bank and they clear, 30% of that check into your account or X number of dollars, whatever, and you can go and spend that, even though technically you don't have it yet. If the check bounces, then you have to pay that money back.
Right.
That's all it is. It's a loan. So you don't actually have a completed transaction. With Bitcoin, you have that completed transaction in 20 minutes.
Right. And then when you factor in like fractional reserve banking, which is like no one really has the money. And, if everyone came and if even, 20% of the people came and got their money, it would be this, massive crisis. Whereas with Bitcoin, the money was here and now it's over there. And that's the 100% of the amount of the money there. So it eliminates all of the inflationary effects that come from fractional reserve banking and whatever, which is why you have central bankers that hate it. Related to this,
as a system, it's just a much better system. It's a much better monetary system.
Oh yeah. So you think that Bitcoin's gonna pretty much just dominate and over time there may still be smaller coins, but for the most part, the bulk, it's going to dominate the market moving forward?
I'm not a purist maximalist. So I think that there are, like, for example, the dollar is the currency in the United States, right?
Right.
But I also buy things with credit card points and, all sorts of other types of currency. There are use cases for other types of things.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So where those use cases apply, sure, there will be other currencies. I think that let's say 20 years from now, you might go into a store and look at the price on something, and that price is in Bitcoin. Now, once you get to the cash register, you might pay in Monero if you want to, and you might pay in Chase Sapphire points, Chase Unlimited points.
Right.
And I think that those will all be. I think that Chase points will be on a blockchain, and I think that Amex points will be on a blockchain. I think that you'll be able to use those things interchangeably with any other currencies on a what do they call it, on a swap, right?
Right.
So the merchant might be getting paid in Bitcoin, but you're paying in Chase points, which are a blockchain token.
Right, but the actual medium for exchange will be Bitcoin.
I think that pricing benefits from being consistent.
Right, and stable.
So,
right. Yeah.
So having, if you go into this store and the price is in Bitcoin, you go to the store next door and the price is in Ethereum, and you have to sit there and start doing calculations and keeping track of 1,000 different currencies in order to know what the price of anything is. I think that creates a market that's very inefficient and confusing.
Yeah.
So I think that even if a merchant wants to be paid in Ethereum, they'll still price everything on their store shelves in Bitcoin, and you can still pay at the cash register in Bitcoin. It's just that they'll have a swap to Ethereum, as it comes into their wallet.
Right. And even just having to figure out two of them. So like when we were just in Niagara Falls, a lot of places have this much Canadian, this much American. Even that has people like well, I don't. Well, do you want to use our American or Canadian? And it's like, and really they're just basically doing a little bit rougher version of the.
Which gets you the slightly better price too. Sure.
Well, and that's the thing. So people are trying to figure out, they're going and like Googling what their bank's exchange rate is to figure out if they can, and it's, for like a fast food meal or something, like they're going to save 6 cents or whatever. But people do that. Whereas, now if you've got it, and especially when you've got these coins and it's going to be down to like, the 6 decimal point, and you're just trying, like you said, it's going to be too blocky to be used on a mass scale for the average consumer who's just like, I want to know what it costs so I can buy it and then go about the rest of my day. We have a question. We have a question from Levi Markel, who I don't maybe related, who said he said, what's that?
Yeah, he's my cousin.
Oh, okay. He asked, what actual value does crypto hold in a permanent sense when compared to gold or whatever?
What value does gold hold in a permanent sense? All value is subjective, so nothing really has any value until somebody values it. How much value does gold have when you're in the desert and you're dying of thirst, and somebody says, "I will sell you a bottle of water for 5 gold coins," and that's all you have on you? You'll give 5 gold coins. Now, right now, that's $7,000 worth of gold, but doesn't matter. Value is subjective to the situation and to the individual. So it doesn't really matter whether it's gold or water or cryptocurrency.
Right. Or like our future president, Marianne Williamson, says, value is created when one helps another actualize their potential, which sounds suspiciously like capitalism. But anyway, so speaking of Bitcoin, you can actually use Bitcoin to purchase tickets to AnarchoVegas, which is coming up July 20th and 21st. Tell us a little bit about AnarchoVegas. You said this is the first year that you guys are doing this, right?
This is the first year, and we wanted to do something, locally in the States where, a lot of people find it hard to go to things like Anarchapulco.
Right.
You got to have a passport, which costs money, and the flights are expensive, and, hotels, and, the whole thing, right? So for a lot of people, that's out of reach. So we wanted to do something where, Vegas is very cheap to fly to from anywhere in the States. Tends to be. It's pretty cheap to stay in. And we thought, this is a fun city, and people can come and enjoy a weekend and hear a bunch of speakers and learn something and walk away with, knowledge and connections and relationships from people that they've met without having to travel internationally.
Right. Very cool. So what kind of you have some speakers booked already, right?
Yes.
Who are some of the people that you have coming up for AnarchoVegas?
So the full speaker list is on the website, AnarchoVegas.com, but we'll have, as far as like big names that people might recognize, we'll have Larkin Rose and G. Edward Griffin. Jeff Berwick will be speaking at AnarchoVegas. We have a name that a lot of people know him as Bo of the Fifth Column, and a lot of people know him as Justin King. And
okay. Yeah.
Bo, have you seen any of the Bo videos?
I've heard of Bo of the Fifth Column. Yeah.
Have you watched any of his stuff?
Not recent. I have, but not one that I could. I just remember that name and remember watching something that someone shared from him.
It's funny. He gets shared on like Now This and what's that? Like some staunch Democratic page or various things like that.
Right.
And he never uses the word anarchy, but at least not in his Bo persona. But
that's smart though. That's smart though.
Very guy. Yeah, amazing what kind of effect he's having in the sort of outside world. Preaching, instead of preaching to the choir, preaching to people who see that there's something wrong in the world and can't quite put their finger on it because they're so bombarded with propaganda. but he cuts right through it in an amazing way. So he'll be speaking. This is his first time publicly as Bo speaking as an anarchist. So that's interesting.
Cool.
We'll have a crypto panel that Sterling Luhan will be moderating. We'll have a media panel that Naomi Brockwell will be moderating, an independent media panel. And we'll have David Rodriguez speaking about homeschooling and unschooling.
Nice.
And
that's one of my favorite subjects.
There's Ovens O'Brien will be speaking. She's fantastic. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yeah, I've heard of her as well. Unschooling is one of my favorite subjects. Didn't realize it at the time, but I was unschooled the last couple of years of high school. When I had been homeschooled previously, my parents had used religious homeschool materials because they were the easiest to find. Right. And then so it wasn't markedly the curriculum wasn't markedly different than what was at regular public school. The difference was that my dad was taking me around and like showing me life and how things apply to, math applies to things and science applies to things, but the actual curriculum was roughly the same. The last 2 years where my dad was just pretty much keeping me out of juvie because none of the high schools in our county would take me. It was a lot more of a relaxed way of teaching that there's like, these are the things that the state requires you to learn. And so we're going to learn those things, but we're not going to use like a set curriculum to do that. And it worked way better. And it prepared me that was the same time that I was telling you I started a web design company that had me in the same mindset where it was like, oh, wow, I can apply this stuff and make money from it. Classic Jew. My dad's teaching me like how things can make money for me. And I'm like, oh, so I can actually start making money from this. And whereas I think if I had been in school during that time, in public school during that time, I'd have been, now you go to college, now you go to post-grad, now you become doctor, lawyer, philosopher, whatever. You become whatever, hopefully something that could actually make money. And I'm grateful that I was so bad in 9th and 10th grade that the schools wouldn't take me, because that allowed me to be kind of set up to be more independent. Were you public schooled or homeschooled or?
Well, my mother was a school teacher.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You told me that. Yeah.
So we were enrolled in school and we physically went to school, but most of my education came from, basically at home, but not in a homeschooling, structured curriculum sort of way.
Right.
But just in the sense that my parents, my father was very scholarly and always encouraged learning. We had a house full of books. We didn't have a television in the house, so we read a lot. And much of my education came from 13 words that my parents would tell me when we'd ask them a question. They would say, "Let's go to the library and see if there's a book about it."
Yes.
And so we'd go to the library and, 5 kids, we'd pile into the station wagon and come back. At that time, you were allowed to check out 5 books at a time. And we'd come back home with 25 books, 5 each. And the librarians didn't believe that we were actually, reading 5 books in the, in the allotted, I think it was 2 weeks time period that we had them. And, it was funny because we actually didn't read. I would check out 5 books and my brother would check out 5 books and so on and so forth.
Right.
We weren't reading 5 books. I would finish my books and then I'd go and read his books.
Right.
And so we read a lot. And so that's where my education really came from.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is our childhood seemed like they parallel a lot because here's another thing. So my mom is incredibly bright. She's not, and she'd be the first one to say, she's not very, she has things that interest her, but she's not like me or like you, where it's like you sort of want to learn all these different things. She's not so much like that. So when I would ask her stuff, she would say, and she didn't know, she'd go, "I don't know, let's go find out." And she'd take me to the library and we would, and I'm also a pre-internet kid, and we'd check out books and or I'd sometimes stay there for quite a while and read stuff there. When the internet happened, I turned into a total nerd because I didn't care about the rest of these losers at all. Now I could literally just stay at home and learn stuff at the speed of a dial-up connection, and
right.
And it was incredible. But so one of the things you're featuring in the and we've only loosely mentioned him before. You have a free Ross Ulbricht, or Ulbricht, I'm not sure how you say that, thing that's happening during that, and then I think you're gonna have Russ's, is that his mother there?
Yeah, Lynn is his mother. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about Russ Ulbricht. Is it Ulbricht or Ulbricht?
I think it's Ulbricht.
Yeah, I think it is as well. We've mentioned it briefly on this show, and we've mentioned him a couple times on the show I co-host with Matt Wright, Muddy Waters of Freedom. Give us a little primer on Russ Ulbricht, and just the absolute travesty of what's happened to him.
So to start with, he created a website where people could securely conduct trade, any kind of trade. I mean, you
right.
could sell their chairs or whatever. You could sell anything on that marketplace, but it was secure, and identities were very well hidden and so on. And so it was essentially a drug marketplace. Now, Ross himself was just a webmaster,
right.
System, and he ran the site. And they somehow, a couple of federal agents were able to infiltrate, and they busted him, and he went to prison for conspiracy to money launder and conspiracy to, I'm trying to remember exactly what the charges were, but it was, basically, drug dealing and money laundering and stuff like that, which actually
every single crime of commerce that they could put on him.
Right. But he hadn't actually ever committed any of those crimes. That's the thing. And not only hadn't A, committed any of those crimes, B, there are actually laws in place that protect webmasters from crimes that are committed by people on their website.
Right.
So, for example, if you're Craigslist and somebody is doing human trafficking and prostitution on your site, you're not liable for what your users do. So there are actually laws about that.
Right. That's the thing. So I mean, if he's in jail, because he's in jail for like the rest of his life, right?
Essentially, yeah.
I mean, unless he's pardoned or appealed or whatever. But I mean, he's as the sentencing stands, he'll never see freedom again. And
right.
You've got, and in my mind, like you said, Craigslist, Backpage, up here, what's it called? That's big here. It's like the Canadian Kijiji. There's so much illegal. Facebook.
Sure.
I have seen people post weed in Facebook Marketplace. Why is Mark Zuckerberg not going to jail for this? Now, of course, just like with Russ, Mark has absolutely nothing to do with that. Or going even further, if someone sells something and misrepresents it on Amazon, why would Jeff Bezos not then get a racketeering charge for conspiracy to defraud people? Why do you think that the reason? My theory is that the reason they came after him so hard is because it was they had such a hard time for so long infiltrating it, as opposed to Craigslist, where you just basically sit there and wait for someone stupid enough to say, hey, you want to buy crack or whatever. And this was like, it was more difficult. Do you think there's more to it, or do you think it was just that he made a better website, so he's spending the rest of his life in prison for it?
It was so effective that I believe they felt they had to make an example out of the Silk Road in order to scare off anybody from doing that. And I mean, interestingly enough, as soon as he was arrested, people started working on Silk Road 2, and that went up, pretty much a couple months later, 3 months later.
Right.
Silk Road 2 went up, and then that guy got arrested, and I think he's already out. And then Silk Road 3 went up, and there were other people that were arrested for sites like this, and none of them got anywhere near that sort of sentence. I think they just wanted to make an example out of Ross, to the point where his trial can barely even be considered a trial. It was such a kangaroo trial. Actually, the two federal agents that were involved in infiltrating and arresting him, those two agents were arrested themselves, actually, on corruption and stealing money, and the whole thing was just such a screw up.
Yeah.
And they were not allowed to point out any of that in Ross's trial. you know, and they had these agents had access to, they had admin access to the site. You know what I mean when I say root access, right? They They could have falsified any of the evidence that was presented, you know.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And again, like you said, other people have been making it since then, and haven't gotten nearly the charges when they've been caught. It stinks to hell. From what I've read, I'm like, half of it was, yes, he made something so effective that it made it really, really, really a lot easier to sell drugs online and sell prostitution and whatever other voluntary commerce that consenting adults want to engage in that's illegal. It made it a lot easier for a while, at least. But I think some of it was just stuff specific to him, like you said, corrupt cops and everything else. It's absolutely ridiculous. So you guys are having, I guess, a benefit to free him, and I know there's a petition attached. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing.
Right. And so essentially, with the Free Ross Party, there's well, that's included in, you know, if you buy a ticket to AnarchoVegas, you go to the party, no problem. If you know, we have our event basically the same day, the same weekend as Freedom Fest. So if any Freedom Fest attendees want to, after Freedom Fest ends on Saturday, if they want to come Saturday night to the party, it's a $30 donation. We're just basically going to cover our costs for the location and, you know, cleaning costs and whatever purchases we have to do, and then after that, everything goes to Lynn. I think actually somebody's donating some really cool custom, like one-off merchandise that will be auctioned.
Nice.
For that also. So I haven't seen it yet, but should, from what I hear, it's some pretty cool stuff. So that's worth checking out. So yeah, if somebody's at Freedom Fest and wants to come, or if you just happen to live in Vegas or be around and you don't want to come to the conference, or you're busy on Sunday, but just come and hang out and party with us on Saturday night.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's very, very cool. Yeah, I think I think you're going to do well on this, because I've heard such great things about Anarcho but the first thing I hear from people that don't go is like, you know, I'm having to get a passport or a lot. So I've met a lot of people that I've talked to, a lot of people that the reason they can't go is because they have some kind of charge on their record that they actually can't go to Mexico. Like they've got some kind of stupid simple possession charge or DUI charge from God knows how long ago, and they can't go. So this actually makes it a lot easier if you want to be able to go to that, and it's obviously would be less expensive too. So that's really cool.
I've talked to Justin King and Jeff Berwick about getting Justin to come down to speak at Anarcho, and Justin goes, "Sorry, but I can't. You know, just I can't travel." You know, so he's got also, you know, some kind of legal stuff, and so
can't go.
You're not going to see him at Anarcho ever.
Yeah,
and that goes for other people too. You just can't travel out of the country.
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
My co-host on the Muddy Waters of Freedom couldn't visit me up here in Canada because he has like an old possession charge in a country where weed is legal now. Weed is legal here. Or at least, you know, state purchased weed or weed you grow on your own or whatever but weed's legal here. But if you have a possession charge somewhere else, you cannot come here. And so unless he gets, you know, pays to get, you know, some stupid misdemeanor expunged from his record, he can't come here. So it's ridiculous. But so AnarchoVegas, so that's really cool. Yaakov, thank you again for joining us. I really had an absolute blast having you on. Before I let you go, I just want to give you a chance to talk about anything that you... Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to ask you about, and then we'll do your final thoughts after that. Do you... I don't know. Do you consider yourself an anarcho-capitalist or just no hyphenation anarchist, or...
I used to. Lately, I'm leaning much more towards just anarchist without adjectives. I think that a lot of people get caught up in the semantics of you know, I always like to make a differentiation between like proprietarian anarchism and anti-proprietarian anarchism.
Right.
ANCAP versus ANCOM, because it's not really, the lines aren't as clear as ANCAP versus ANCOM. It's really proprietarian versus anti-proprietarian. Right. And the truth of the matter is, and let me ask you a question actually. Do you believe that, let's say let's say I go and I homestead a property, and I build it out, and it's legitimately owned by me, and so on, and I pass away, right? And my children couldn't care less. It's it's just some property out in the woods, and it's run down and whatever, and they couldn't care less about it, and so it just lies fallow and starts to deteriorate. And somebody comes in 10 years later and says, okay, this is cool. There's already a foundation here. There's a couple of walls still up. I'm going to move into this property and rebuild it. Well, let's say they rebuild it, and my grandson or something goes out to to visit there because he heard that grandpa had a place out there and he wants to go see it, and he sees that there's this really nice house that somebody built there, and he goes, oh well, that's my grandfather's property, he wants to claim it. Do you believe that in between there's some kind of abandonment, or that abandonment of property is possible? You personally?
So this is an excellent question about essentially the nature of the stickiness of property rights. And
Right.
I'm going to give myself 30 seconds on the clock and answer this. So I think that in general, this is somewhat of a trolley problem, in that if someone's value, what the value they see in a property is so low that they just let it sit there, someone's probably going to buy it from them for next to nothing. So I think in most cases it deals with itself, but in general, I think that in a post-state society, you're gonna find that a question like that is going to be settled by that local community, and in most cases, that far along, no, it would be hard for them to argue that it was abandoned. I know I've gone past the 30 seconds, but it would be hard to argue that it was not abandoned. If you're talking generations, if you're talking 5 or 6 years, that's one thing. But if you're talking generations, I think in most communities, they're going to end up saying, yeah, you haven't really done anything with this. And, your great grandfather or whatever owned this, but, there's been nothing here. And, everything that was here before has, disintegrated, and, the trees have grown up over. It's not really yours anymore. What do you agree with me on that, or?
That's the wrong answer. The correct answer is that if they registered it with some kind of title company and it was possible to find the owners, right, and they made the effort to register the property, and so somebody saw that property and said, oh, I want that property, let me see if there are owners. If it was impossible to find the owners and they moved in, and
Right.
You're going to come in and say, hey, that's mine. Well, go ahead and prove it. I'm sorry, you can't prove it, and I'm going to defend what I've built here, right? If you've made the effort to register that property with some kind of title company where it's findable, and somebody can look for the owners and find them and say, hey, I'll give you $100 or whatever for that property, a Bitcoin, right? Then that removes the issue of abandonment.
And that's actually
it'll be solved by markets, but not by philosophy.
Right. And that's actually an interesting thing, because I just recently had read about the idea of, where people go, well, who's going to enforce property without a state? And people were saying you could actually apply the blockchain to use as sort of a trustless system of having, basically a register that anyone can check at any given time of who owns what land and what larger like buildings and things like that, or who owns ownership shares of a company and things. That those are all things that can be in a trustless blockchain without needing state enforcement for it.
Right. So I think that markets will solve the issue, not philosophy. So I think that the idea of sticky property is kind of irrelevant, because you can cry from now till next year about property being sticky, but when it comes down to real life, either the market has solved for stickiness, or come up with some solution that allows you as an owner of property to protect your property.
And if it doesn't, then we're right back to square one at some point, where you've got a state.
Well, you only own what you can defend.
Right. Yeah.
That's just a fact of reality. That has nothing to do with, we live in call it a statist society, right? The truth of the matter is we live in an anarchist society. only that there are criminals, and anarchism doesn't do away with criminals. Like, you'll still have criminality. We just have to find market solutions to criminality. And so things like ways, for example, which allow you to bypass highway robbers. But the more those solutions become, the freer and more secure we'll be, economically and in our personal lives and so on. But we have to actually find market solutions.
Right.
Philosophy is irrelevant. So saying that I believe in sticky property or don't believe in sticky property, that I'm proprietarian or anti-proprietarian is sort of irrelevant,
Well, you can only, and this is my egoist speaking. Like you said, you can only own what you can defend, either through you or a proxy. If you aren't, even something as small as a toothbrush, if your ability to defend it is less than the perceived self-interest of the person who wants to take it from you,
right,
it ain't yours anymore at some point.
If you have money in the bank and the IRS seizes it, it's not your money anymore.
It's not your money anymore. The reason that I am secure that no one's going to take this bottle of water from me is because A, I've already drank from it, B, which means the person's going to want it that much less. There's very little perceived self-interest on their part to take this bottle of water from me because they could get in trouble for it. I might fight them for it. I wouldn't, because I have another one right here. But there are so many other reasons that instead of doing that, they either go buy the bottle of water themselves, or they say, hey, can I have this other bottle of water? And I'd say, yeah, sure. But it's not the belief in the nature of property rights that allows me to feel secure that no one's going to try to kill me for this bottle of water. It's the reality of life and of power that makes it that way. But it's an interesting subject. And I like the fact that markets solve things, that we don't have to go back to a forced association system because there's a market system that's better. If people are able to organize within a system of forced association, which is a far less than ideal way of doing things, then they can definitely do it in a system of voluntary association where they can come up with far better and more efficient ways of doing things.
Right. And the history of freedom is the history of markets.
Right.
The Magna Carta wasn't signed because of magnanimity. It was signed because of it was a response to objective reality of what was going on in the world,
Yeah, it was the king not wanting to die. I mean, a lot of times where the state has ceded any level of control or decentralized anything, it's usually after a revolt or a threat of a revolt that was a very effective threat, or a very what's the word I'm looking for? Credible threat of a revolt. They go, okay, well here, you can have a little bit of this and that, and I mean, so it is what it is. So anyway, again, really great to have you on. I hope to be able to have you on again soon. Maybe to promote future AnarchoVegas events. But before I let you go, I just want to give you a chance to talk about anything that you feel like we haven't addressed. If there's anything that you want to plug or promote, now is your time to do it. You have as much time as you want. Yaakov Markel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Really just, I'd like everybody to go to AnarchoVegas.com and come check us out. We have a great speaker lineup. It's going to be a pretty interesting party. And one of the things that people love about going to Anarchapulco is not even as much the speakers, although that's certainly part of it, but being able to go and hang out with Lark and Rose, outside and have a conversation with Jeffrey Tucker and Jeff Kowick and G. Edward Griffin and, hey, G. Edward Griffin, let me buy you a beer. And so those interactions and relationships and other people that you meet who are also there, it's just such a amazing social experience, and that's why I've gone back every year. Not because I go for the speakers. I sit still very poorly when somebody's talking at me. It's
right.
From school years, I don't do it very well, but to be able to sit at the bar and have a 4-hour conversation with Mark Edge or Jeffrey Tucker or whoever, it's just an amazing experience, and it's worthwhile. So yeah, definitely come and check us out, and we'll actually have, I don't know how many tickets we have left for it, but we're doing a speakers brunch right before the conference starts, and we only have 20 tickets available, and I'm not sure how many have sold. So if you want to do something like that, that'll be really cool. And yeah, that's it. Check me out at Anarchy Jewish Man on Facebook, and tend to post interesting stuff, I think. So that's my spiel.
Very good. Good spiel. I'm happy for your spiel.
And we managed to get through the whole show without making any oven jokes.
Well, you kind of did a preview before. I had my 2 guests ago, Remzo Martinez said that this is sort of the opposite of, I'm the anti-Anne Frank. I'm in the basement and everyone knows where I am. Now we did a Jew joke. But guys, yeah, be sure to check out AnarchoVegas, and all of the links are going to be in the show notes. So be sure to check those all out. The Anarchy Jewish Man, and all of that. Yaakov, again, thank you so much. Stick around. I'm going to talk with you for a bit during the outro. But guys, thank you again for tuning in to My Fellow Americans. It was an absolute mitzvah. There you go. It's a mitzvah to have you here. And so be sure to... What's that?
Thank you very much for having me. It was an enjoyable conversation.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And guys, be sure to tune in tomorrow night, the 11th, for Matt Wright on the Writer's Block. He will be interviewing Kim Ruff, the one of the Libertarian presidential candidates, and then on Friday night, Shabbat Shalom, it's Jason Lyon. He's a Gentile, but be sure to check him out on Mr. America, The Bearded Truth, and then have a great weekend. Tune in again next Monday for Jason Lyon on his non-Shabbat episode of Mr. America, The Bearded Truth, and then tune in on Tuesday night where for the Muddy Waters of Freedom, where Matt Wright and I will be parsing through the week's events with the joy of a child. And then tune in again next Wednesday right here, probably 8 p.m. for My Fellow Americans. I will be who was my guest? Charity Nicole will be my guest. So be sure to check that out. But guys, thanks again for watching. We will see you soon, and God bless you.
They say about an eye for an eye in a time when the blind lead the blind. Who am I to deny? I would cry when a loved one dies. I recognize that body outside with the holes in the body that was alive. Now confined with a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's my sister.